Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
School year is hot and heavy already. Fighting those buses.
Yep, kids are back at school. Fall weather's coming.
Good stuff.
So today we've got a special guest, Barret Katuna. And Barret is the executive officer at Sociologists for Women in Society. Barret, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. How are you today?
We're about Sociologists for Women in Society. What do they do, and what do you do there?
Sure. So I've been in this role for about 2.5 years now, and I serve as the executive officer, which means that I'm responsible for all the daily affairs of this feminist academic nonprofit organization. We are located in Connecticut, but we have 2 meetings a year. One is in the summer that we just wrapped up. That was in conjunction with the American Sociological Association meeting in New York City. And then we have one coming up in San Diego in 2020 at the end of January. And so what we do is we bring academics together and non-academics who identify as sociologists, who believe in our feminist mission. And we provide mentoring opportunities, networking opportunities, leadership development, it's a really great space for scholars who are starting out to present their research at our academic conferences. And it's also a space where we provide opportunities for presentations at all levels. So there are junior academics, senior academics. We do international advocacy work. We have a president of the United Nations each year and participate in the Commission on the Status of Women. So we're really an active organization, and I became involved in it when I was in graduate school, and I'm really privileged now to be leading the organization that really helped me get my start and figure out where I belonged in the academy, which is actually outside of the academy, running this nonprofit.
All right, so for those of us who are not sociologists and don't do research, could you boil down what is the mission of the organization?
Sure. So the mission of the organization is to provide feminist mentoring, a space for publications and dissemination of information. The mission is related to activism. You can read more about it at our organizational website is www.socwomen.org. Our organizational name, as you can tell, obviously it's Sociologists for Women in Society, but at the same time, we're not just for women, we're for gender equality in society. So we focus on issues that the intersex, trans, and non-binary community faces, and that's something that I do address in my book. So we're really a space for we evolved out of the 1969 Women's Caucus at the American Sociological Association meeting, where women were not being respected and our research was not being respected. Women weren't even allowed in some of the same spaces as the men. There were meetings taking place at one of the bars that the Hilton in San Francisco, which is kind of interesting. We're heading back there in 2020 for the summer meeting, but women weren't allowed in the bar, and there were meetings taking place there that they wanted to be a part of, and meetings taking place at various different restaurants where women weren't allowed to go to. So women just got together and said, this is insane. Like, we're starting our own organization. And so we're gearing up for our 50th anniversary that will be celebrated in 2021 because we incorporated in 1971. So we're really about giving scholars a space to grow and, kind of figure out where they belong in where they were most comfortable. And so we're really developing our mentoring capacity as well, because we realize that scholars and people outside of the academy who identify as sociologists, who are also applied sociologists, they require and are looking for mentoring all throughout the way of their life. So someone might be a full professor but still looking for a mentor, and someone might be an early stage academic looking for some assistance outside of their own institution. So that's what we really promote, is developing those relationships, and that can oftentimes lead to collaborations in the future on publications.
Yeah, and you just mentioned your book. Barret is an author, and I met Barret when she was a professor over at the University of Connecticut, and we were working with students over there, which was really, really fun. But you and I sit down periodically, and you told me about writing the book, Degendering Leadership in Higher Education. And what it was is you did a series of interviews of a lot of different people. So tell us about your journey there, and tell us about some of the more interesting interviews and how you came up with this. And obviously, before we're done, you have to give us the link to the book. I know it's on Amazon too, but congratulations for launching it, and hopefully things are going well so far. But tell us about the journey.
Sure. Yeah. So the journey that led me there, I actually worked in higher education before coming to the University of Connecticut, and I absolutely loved being at a university. I went to Lehigh University for my undergraduate degree, and then I did a master's degree program there as well, and then just kind of decided that I really loved like the administrative side with admissions and fundraising, and I found myself working for Lehigh University as an associate director of admissions. And I was there at a time when we were welcoming in our first woman president, Dr. Alice Gass. And it was a really interesting time to be on campus, because Lehigh is an institution that was an all men's institution up until 1971. And so here we were, I guess it was probably 2006 or so, when Dr. Gass was coming in as president, the first woman, and she was a very highly esteemed engineering professor. I think she has her PhD from Princeton. She's just very, very world-renowned scholar. And there were some people who were not thrilled with that decision. There were people who were talking about, oh, how are things going to change now that there's a woman running the university? And I just started to really, at that time, I wasn't even enrolled in a PhD program, but I just was really in touch with that conversation and was really paying attention to what people were saying. And then, I found myself, I applied to graduate school, got into UConn. I had really no idea what I was going to do in terms of my dissertation. I wasn't one of those students who knew like on day one exactly what my dissertation project was going to be. I actually studied human rights more so in the earlier stages of my career, and looked at women's organizing for the Nepali Women's Global Network, an organization that I learned about once I was at UConn. But then Dr. Susan Herbst, it was announced that she was going to become the first woman president at UConn. So I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. Here I find myself, I'm at another institution that's experiencing its first woman president. And so, and I started to, again, hear people talking about how things might change with a woman leading the university. And I thought, why are these conversations happening? These women are, like, people were saying, oh, maybe the presidency will be more friendly, or more, she'll just have more open access to her office, and she'll be more motherly than, she'll just be more like soft and friendly perhaps than we've seen in the past. I was just interested in those dialogues. And then at the same time, I started to really hone in on conversations, some that were even happening at UConn, where there was a scholar who came in who was talking to young women primarily about how to lead in a man's world and how to kind of become more masculine in order to succeed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really not, there's something going on here. There's something wrong with that messaging. I think we need to be telling future leaders, women, men, non-binary, intersex, trans, we need to be just talking about leading with a good, solid ethical foundation. not leading in a masculine or a feminine way, because those are it's very problematic when we're utilizing those terms, because it creates these binary categories that people have to somehow find themselves in, define themselves into those categories. And so as a gender scholar, I started to problematize that, and so that became the basis of my research, was examining these questions of how the role that gender plays in the narratives of women and men leaders, how might leaders' gendering of leadership reproduce gender stereotypes, and then the strategies that leaders and institutions of higher education might use to degender leadership. And so ultimately, the focus of the book is to figure out like what might degendered leadership look like, and to kind of get rid of these paradigms that are very, very, very problematic. So I set out to do interviews. I interviewed 34 women and men who served as presidents, deans, and provosts at institutions throughout the United States. It was an incredibly rewarding experience, getting access to some of the most highly esteemed leaders in the country. And they respected my project, given that some of them had done qualitative interviews for their dissertations in the past, and really gave me a lot of wonderful feedback. But I think something that really sticks with me from the interviews is that, gender, it's definitely a salient factor in how someone's experience, and the chitter chatter that a woman might encounter that might be sexist in nature when she's first on the job, but then how, as one evolves in one's career, sometimes then gender means less to some of the women. This is something that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but makes complete sense. Some of the women who were nearing the end of their careers, in their late 50s, early 60s even, were saying, now that I'm older, it doesn't matter as much. People know not to make those comments anymore. So it's definitely, it matters if someone is how gender matters in terms of how someone experiences the social world and how we're socialized from the beginning of our lives. We're socialized, before we're even born. Our parents are gendering us and having gender reveal parties, even though gender is a social construction. But it doesn't mean that you have to lead in a certain way if you happen to be a woman or a man. And the people I interviewed were no one identified as intersex or non-binary or trans, but the point of the book is that, moving forward to a situation where we're going to see more people leading from this community of the non-binary community, we need to be prepared to not speak about gender in these binary contexts, because it's very, could be very, very, very problematic.
Yeah, you talk about eliminating the non-binary form of gender. But isn't it true? Gender itself is simply a matter of genetics and reproduction. It's all of these other characteristics that society has sort of dumped on them that's really more fluid, isn't it?
So yeah, so sociologists talk about like sex as a you're born with a sex, whether intersex, whether it's male or female. But then society tells boys, like, oh, you should want to wear blue.
Right.
You shouldn't want to wear the butterfly or have a unicorn birthday party. But it's fine. A little boy can love unicorns and love to wear butterflies, and that's okay. But it's society that is telling the little boy, like, you shouldn't like that. That's not okay. Those toys are for girls. Those toys are for boys. But so yeah. To get back to your point, yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's, we're actually putting these, I don't want to say negative, but I guess these non-constructive